Welcome to Theology for Teachers. My name is Ed Hannenberg, and I'm the chair of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies here at John Carroll. And I'm delighted to begin our second session for the day on the topic of intelligent design, creating courses for a digital generation. And leading us in some reflection on that topic is my colleague here at John Carroll University, Father Maurice, who is director of the Digital Marketing and Communications Strategy Master's Program and an assistant professor of communication here at John Carroll. Father Emilou specializes in digital media, in communications, church communication, and brand storytelling, with a focus on research focusing on digital narratives and the intersection of technology and theology. He's authored 8 books and produced several television programs for the Global Catholic Television Network. He is a Harvard-trained digital media designer who holds a master's degree in communication from John Carroll, postgraduate diploma in journalism from the International Institute of Journalism, and a PhD in theology from Liverpool Hope University in the United Kingdom. His presentation, as I said, is titled Intelligent Design, Creating Courses for a Digital Generation. Please join me in welcoming Father Emilou.
Thank you, Ed, for this humble invitation. I appreciate it. And all the coordinators who are part of putting this together. I'm learning a lot from Ed on how to put together our own digital program down the line. But thank you for great inspiration. How is everybody today? That doesn't sound good enough to me. You know, teaching theology to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I believe, thrives when students actively engage with content that is relevant, reflective. Brian talked about contemplation and creatively engaged. That's my claim. The rest of the conversation this morning will be to flesh out that claim and maybe stimulate some kind of thought, some kind of questioning, some kind of wonder. During this past Christmas vacation, I spent time with my younger sister in Illinois. She and her husband are devout Catholics, and they have 5 children attending Catholic schools. It was a fun time for bonding with my nieces and nephews. It was interesting. We played. Aren't they cool? We prayed, we played, we sang, we danced. I also celebrated masses with them, as I always do when I visited them. And generally when I visit, I use the occasion of the mass during the homily, to teach a particular aspect of the faith in ways I suppose they would relate to. They always seemed engaged. During this last visit, I wanted to communicate something about creation and divine beauty to them. And I chose a different approach. It was fascinating and providential for me that the first talk today was on creation, and I didn't even know. This is how God works. Providence. My department, the Tim Russell Department of Communication, assigned me to create a new website for the Blue Streak Media. And I like to create websites from scratch sometimes to tweak and twist it the way I want. So I promised to work on it during the Christmas vacation. So I took the task with me on this particular visit. spending vacation time on work-related things is not always the best idea. We all agree. But sometimes it might be necessary. So to make the work fun and also my fun time productive, I invited my nieces and nephews to join me in the office as I wrote each line of codes. Customizing the various features of the content management system. What's going on here? At first, my nieces and nephews weren't so much interested. But they became curious as they watched how one line of code changed color from blue to red. And tweaks that changed things from before and after. It really sparked their interest. They were eager to take over the actual design. So they were eager to take over the actual design. Uncle, can I try? One asked. Sure, you can. So I handed them my laptop while overseeing what they were doing because you don't want them to mess things up. One said, do this way. Another interjected, not that color, the other color. And I sat back and watched. It was fun. And so it went for hours. And I mean like hours. They didn't even remember to eat. 8 hours, 9 hours. I said, no, bring their food here. They said, bring it more, bring it over here. Hours. The whole house was quiet. My sister was like, are you going to be visiting often? In between, I would invite them to pause and talk about what they were doing. I introduced the idea of making things from nothing and then from something else and on and on and on. I told them how God created the world and how things came into being, one step after another. It was a soft introduction to the theology of creation. One of them, the oldest son, said, Uncle, it was like what we were doing just now, wasn't it? From nowhere, this blue color became something else. This number changed. I can see how everything is connected. Is that how the world is connected? I said, sure, and there is more. I was careful not to tell him it was not quite like that. But I could see he was grasping the idea, even if imperfectly. And sometimes for the younger folks, walk them through the known before you go to the unknown. Tell us, they chorused. We then opened the book of Genesis, and from there, our conversations progressed. We used some images on the design board to illustrate different metaphors in biblical language and descriptions. They provided more examples for me to reflect on, to ponder. And while they reflected along, they were giving me the message. I became their student. I noticed that all their examples related to their own experiences, the things they use, the realities around them. From a simple coding experience, they could relate to the concept of creation as Gen Alphas. Fascinating. They had fun. And for me, their teacher, I had fun too. So let's talk about the art of teaching. Teaching. A teacher is a facilitator of learning. Do you agree? Does a teacher teach learning? I don't think so. We can talk about that. We can argue about that. The goal of teaching is to facilitate and or deepen understanding. You know, earlier we reflected on the theology of creation and all of that. Now we're going to see, if we take a particular thing, how can we relate it to this digital age? It's more like the praxis dimension of it, which follows from a deeper, richer tradition we have in the systematic. My claim that the goal of teaching is to facilitate or deepen understanding is the basic premise of the understanding by design, the UBD, which is what you are recommended to use, isn't it? Moreover, since you access your information from the curriculum on the Digital Academy Decoder, which I believe the Diocese of Cleveland requires you to use, is that correct? If the same design follows UBD. So much of the conceptual framework and thinking required for the curriculum design is mostly done for you. So here, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I would like to focus on the strategy for designing your specific lessons for learning and understanding. That's my goal here. The strategy. How would a theology teacher facilitate understanding theological concepts and experiences for Gen Z and Gen Alpha? How could a Catholic theology teacher in high school design their course so that students truly understand the themes and the concepts of the curriculum? I propose beginning with observation, wonder. How do Gen Zs and Gen Alpha learn? How do they make sense of the world in which they live? What do we know about them that can help us design well? I have to make a disclaimer. We cannot fully understand all cases and individuals, as everyone is unique. John Medina's brain rules, number 3, says, every brain is wired differently. And that's a fact, scientific fact. So we cannot claim to know precisely how everyone learns. Only God knows. Even studies that classify people as visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners, these so-called learning styles, they are highly contested. I know you know that. I suppose you know that. Among experts, expert scholars, and I can give you tons of names, you might have them if you need them. Senna Derker and Carroll Wesley and hundreds of experts in brain and education, in brain processing, in educational processing, all of them agree that the so-called learning style is a myth. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It is neuro-myth. So, if it is a myth, I'm not here to teach you or show a learning style for digital generation, because that too would be a myth. So no one is solely a visual or auditory learner. Instead, each person's learning evolves depending on the type of content and the current state of their learning journey. Learning is a complex experience, and approaching it with a specific fixed style is counterproductive. Hence, the strategy I am proposing today is open-ended and must not be used as a fixed way of teaching to facilitate understanding. Never. A way of thinking, as I have described just now, also relates to our understanding of the characteristics of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. We discuss common threads among a reasonable, sampled Gen Z and Gen Alpha population. Everyone processes information in different ways, including them. Haven't we seen kids who are crazy about TikTok and those who are not at all interested? I have them in my classes. And it might even shock you. In one of my classes that I had 33 students, and I asked them, how many of you use TikTok? Only 30%. Yes. So to presume that all of them like TikTok is a myth. Therefore, we should approach these observations with careful appreciation. So who are they? Research in the past decade provides evidence of some characteristics of Gen Zs. Those who are born, of course, you know, from 1997 to 2012, and then Gen Alphas, the current generation, from 2012 down to today. Gen Zs are frequently characterized as tech-savvy or digital natives, a trait consistently highlighted across multiple scientific studies. And I have tons of evidence for that, which I wouldn't bore you with, because that would be pedantic and boring. It means the metaphors, this generation, the metaphors they use to learn are inherently digital. And the digital ecosystem shapes their sense of aesthetics. And aesthetics, I mean here, is not just beauty. It is both their theory of imagination, their theory of perception, their theory of sensing, their theory of processing, and their theory of appreciation of art. The whole spectrum of their aesthetics. The digital world views reality in bits, and information is often broken down into small portions for learning. The digital is the very concept of discrete data and information. Parts can be broken down and joined with other parts. Gen Zs create many stuffs digitally and can cut images and see how the image A can become image B become image C, and so on and so forth. So for Gen Zs and Alphas with them, a character develops in complex, unfortunately, fluid ways, and reality is constantly changing. This has implication in the way they think. When they say they have short attention span, it is part of the materiality of the digital because of its discrete way of structuring information. So if we are going to blame anybody, blame all of us for creating the technology. Lessons presented through various storytelling methods resonate more with Gen Zs, especially when these lessons incorporate metaphors they can relate to, particularly those rooted in the digital world. I mean, a world that structures information in bits or in small chunks. Gen Z is also known for being collaborative and self-reliant. Therefore, designing learning for them must make it collaborative and proceed toward making them the agents, take agency in their learning process. Agency is one of the things that distinguishes Gen Zs. They want some sort of ownership over their learning. They are pragmatic, value realistic goals, and show a practical mindset. In designing learning for them, they can grasp theoretical, and in the case of this specific conference, theological concepts only if we can make them clear and relatable. St. Augustine's on Christian doctrine, the Doctrina Christina, I think he emphasized clarity and understanding. And I think his work will be very relevant today, once again. Gen Z values diversity and inclusive design resonates deeply with them. While the diversity of cultures, races, sexes, and peoples is vital to Gen Z's way of thinking, because that's their way of thinking. On the other hand, for Gen Alphas, their own stronger emphasis is on accessibility for various learners, as we shall see shortly. Because as to the way they think and the way they process. Therefore, when designing courses and learning experiences, ensure that the language, the text, images, and visuals used reflect this in some ways. Gen Z is environmentally conscious and they value authenticity in interactions. They would have fun exploring biblical stories of creation. How about Gen Alpha? Gen Alpha, on the other hand, is also identified as digital natives, but with a notable emphasis on their early and extensive interaction with technology. They are expected to be the most racially diverse generation, which is likely to shape their social interactions. Mental health concerns such as anxiety are prevalent among them, partly because of the effect of COVID-19, because that's when they were born. Hence, accessibility design is vital to their ways of learning. One who designs learning for this generation must consult resources for an accessible design that considers how to design for people with anxiety, autistic spectrum, deaf or hard of hearing, dyslexia, strange, low vision, physical or motor disabilities, and screen readers. And I provide sources for these kinds of, where you can consult for this kind of thinking in designing for them. And those sources are provided from the UK Home Office for accessibility design. You can look it up online. Gen Alpha displays strong leadership and creativity as well. You may think, we think they are very young. My nieces and nephews proved to me that if you give them a chance, they will surprise you. Thus, considering how to create spaces for them to be creative and lead during the learning process might be a great way to stimulate their learning. Unlike Gen Z, Gen Alpha's sense of identity is particularly tied to racial and ethnic backgrounds. They suffered the devastating effects of COVID-19 and therefore they seek community. Thus, theology and a sense of church where they feel they belong will likely capture their interest. While both generations, and I say this because in our Catholic tradition, I came to understand in the US, typically we don't think of taking kids to church because they cry. That's a mistake. While both generations share digital preferences, Gen Z is distinguished by their strong entrepreneurial spirit and concern for privacy and security, aspects that are less emphasized for Gen Alpha. Of course, they have not started to think of their privacy yet, but they would. Gen Alpha is marked by early exposure to and comfort with technology, which influences their leadership and their creativity development. Traits less pronounced in the descriptions of Gen Z. Gen Alpha's role as influencers in family purchase decisions and their intense emotional connections to media, particularly cartoons, they love cartoons, are unique to their generation. Gamified learning might work in their favor. How do they learn? To summarize all these research review, which is important, foundational to understand our audience. How do these generations learn? They leverage technology to make learning interactive and efficient. They enjoy video contents, interactive experiences, and designs that remind them of what they are accustomed to and how they consume content on social media platforms. Ritual participation is one of their enjoyable ways of learning. For them, learning is about participating and being active in the process, including dialogic conversation. No lectures. They won't follow. Similarly, the more their various senses are stimulated, unfortunately, the more they tend to learn. Also, they are gamified learners. They are both fits into Medina's rule, brain rule number 9. Stimulate more of the senses at the same time. Hence, tools such as, their famous Coyote, Duolingo, Minecraft, they love it. These tools keep Gen Z and Gen Alphas motivated. Why? It's because of these tools' immediate feedback loop and rich sensory effects. Also, the two generations learn quickly through collaborative and iterative tools. Most importantly, they are personalized and self-directed. Hence, tools like Quizlet, they cheat a lot through Quizlet. Quizlet, Khan Academy, many of us use it, a rich resource for high schools. And Photomath allow for personalized learning, enabling both generations to tailor their education to their own pace and needs. Now we know who they are. Now, how does what we know about Gen Zs and Alpha inform how to design learning for them? Because that's why we're here. We might think of these tools without asking why they resonate. Tools, as we know, constantly change. And I'm not here to teach us about tools, because tools constantly changed. In a lecture I gave somewhere else, I was very critical about what I called toolified experience, making our children tools, and all of us tools. That's a problem. Tools constantly change, but intelligent pedagogies live beyond these tools. Beyond these tools, research shows that learning design should ensure students can relate to the concepts and connect them to their unique experiences. Like my nieces that we shared and nephews, who could relate their digital savviness to creation. Such is the world of the digital natives. In short, we want our learners to understand UBD. Design is not simply about visual designs. So if you came here for me to teach you visual designs, I will disappoint you. Visual design is the implementation of the visual elements of design thinking. Design is about making learning relatable to our students based on their ways of sensing, thinking, reflecting, and acting. Good design involves modeling a typical user's journey in the specific learning task the designer seeks to achieve. The classic work by Donald Norman, for those in design, is a classic and engineering. The design of everyday things makes this principle fundamental. Intelligent and good design follows humans based on the way they live, work, explore the world around them, and the way they practice their faith too. Designing is about making thinking visible. And that's not my quote. That's Rich Hart and many other scholars who wrote that book. Making thinking visible. However, since we do not expect every teacher here to be a designer, that will not be your... And if they tell you to be a designer in school, tell them that's not your call. I propose and demonstrate a strategy that might help us as we consider designing different aspects of our courses to facilitate understanding. And anybody can do that, designer or no designer. I use it in the classroom. What I'm going to propose today is what I use in the classroom as well. And this younger generation tend to like that process. It makes thinking visible. And what is it? I called it OEPA strategy. A solution is just a solution among many other solutions. The strategy aligns with high school students' ways of learning, such as active engagement, critical thinking, personal relevance, dialogic participation, and creativity. It's structured around the UBD design, of course, draws from it. It follows 5 stages: observation, analysis, evaluation, production, assessment. Now notice what I'm doing with this PowerPoint. I'm designing. Anybody can do this. I'm using the rule of space and emphasis to focus your attention, to make thinking visible. So when applied to teaching theology, the method breaks down abstract theological concepts into manageable steps, making them more accessible and meaningful for students in their formative years. OEPA does not replace any given pedagogy. Instead, it complements them by helping break down the various structures in bits. Recall that digital is about bits to improve learning. The strategy has 8 foundational or fundamental assumptions. 1, learning is most effective when students are actively involved in the process rather than passive recipients of information. Active engagement. 2, encouraging students to think critically about what they observe, reflect, and relating it to deeper concepts strengthens understanding. That's critical thinking. That's reflection. Assumption 3, students learn better when they can see the relevance of the content to their own lives and their world. That's relating learning to real life. Assumption 4, students internalize concepts more deeply when given opportunities for creative expressions. That's creativity and self-expression. 5, regular feedback and reflection are essential for learning and improvement. All of us know this already. Feedback and continuous improvement. I will emphasize continuous improvement. After all, theology is a process of discovery. Sixth, effective learning is centered around the student's needs and interests. It's student-centered learning. Engaging multiple senses enhances retention and understanding of complex ideas. That's assumption 7. It's about multisensory and experiential learning. And it must not be visual effects. It could also be when you immerse them in a concrete ritual experience. That's also multisensory. Remember when Brian talked about even your leg, feel your leg and feel, that's multisensory. It's not only sound or visuals. And then 8, iterative. Learning is a continuous improvement cycle, requiring reflection and revisiting concepts over and over and over again. Let me tell us, repetition is a good thing in learning. Aquinas actually, not Aquinas, Augustine said it in that doctrine, on Christian doctrine as well. Repeat, turn it around over and over again in different ways. So how does this work? Now let's go to the practical stuff. I think a little stretch. We can now go to the practice dimension. Maybe a little stretch because yeah, you may rise if you want. Stretch. So how does it work? Big idea, you are familiar with that. Let's think of first, before we go to the big idea, let's think of how I go about designing my class lessons, specific lessons with this. Establish the big idea first, which is UBD. It sets the stage for learning. Always signpost it. Signpost it, make it visible. The more visible, the better. The big idea captures the essence of the entire topic one wants to teach, since it is enduring understanding. Then you can proceed. So, for example, the big idea I want to demonstrate today is about baptism. The church and sacrament is one of the core curriculum. So I wanted to use just baptism as an example. So I'll walk us through that. Give the concept, walk us through example. It begins with observation, wonder, observation. Observe. High school students are naturally curious. They want to wonder. You are tapping into their curiosity by making them intentional about observing. The observation step allows you to engage their senses and spark their interest. At this stage, you might consider see, think, wonder routine of Richard and other researchers who were behind that. The see could be also to listen, to think, to wonder. If I were to approach a conversation on baptism, I wouldn't begin by defining, oh, let's talk about baptism. Baptism is this and baptism is that. I wouldn't go that route. I will print the definitions, print it in simple terms, give it to the different students as their reference resource material, and then maybe present something like a video or an art or an experience, and let them just gaze and observe and wonder. You see, this thing is, technology is good when it is not working well. So it's supposed to be a video playing, but it's okay. It's not playing. It's okay. How does it work? Begin with something tangible or visual, such as a religious art, a Bible passage, a short video related to the topic, as I showed. It could also be a gamified illustration that draws attention to what you want them to learn. For example, if you teach about the Passion of Christ, show an image or a scene from the film, The Passion of the Christ, of course, or other films. This stage presupposes you've curated content that will satisfy their curiosity and help you achieve the learning goals. Content creation is wonderful because there are tons of resources out there. I would suggest you read Making Thinking Visible as a background to inform how you create the content that will make it visible. It's a book that is available out there. Open education resources have tons of resources on content creation. Your coder has some sort of content curation as well. Just explore, curate content, do that research for them because they are not there yet, so that they have a little insight into if they have questions on what to wonder. Encourage students to observe the surroundings of personal experiences. The senses help us explore the world and make sense of it. For example, ask them to consider how they have seen or witnessed forgiveness or mercy, if you're talking about that topic. Why it helps? It helps capture attention and connect abstract theological ideas to something they can see, hear, or experience. It appeals to their developmental needs for concrete examples to understand abstract concepts. So let's use our baptism example. The big idea, baptism is the sacrament of initiation and new life. That's the big idea. But before this big idea, you've already explained what is initiation, what is the term sacrament, what is the term new life. Visual stimuli. Begin with a video clip of any selection of your kind. Avoid the temptation to over-design, which means adding more than one element at a time. See here. This image can make them wonder. They can wonder about the two glass of water, the child. They can wonder. Let it be. Focus attention on details. Let them think about that. Why must you use a simple image or a simple text or a focused visual? Because you don't want them to have what we call in aesthetics distributed attention. When you have distributed attention, you see no one, you see everyone. And when you see no one and everyone, you don't see details. Theology is a journey into understanding the depth of the revealed. And it takes a lot of focused attention mentally. Focus the attention. Don't distribute it. You may ask them questions. Ask them to observe, to see the video closely, noting the symbols, actions, emotions. Encourage them to think about what each element might mean. Allow them to wonder. What about this? What about that? What do you think the water symbolizes? How about the candle? How about the Easter candle? You see how I am curating their attention by replacing a particular focus to another focus without causing distraction. If I put all these images all over the place, their mind is going like, you want them to focus on the oil. Well, how about the oil? You've created a collage that looks like one image, and yet they are focused. And that leads us to analysis, the second stage. Once students have observed, they analyze what they see or experience by breaking down the concepts. As you know, most theological concepts are uncommon in these students' everyday language. Do not assume that students are familiar with theological terms and concepts. Even the simplest ones, like the Mass, might be unfamiliar to some of them. The learning design should ensure that these concepts are clearly presented, integrated into the design, and made foundational to the big idea of the specific term or lesson. Typically, I encourage students to work in groups, allowing them to explore and understand concepts through guided analysis. Then you might ask them, why is water used in baptism? What does it symbolize theologically? And questions of that kind that will make them even reflect and wonder more. Linking to doctrine helps students connect their observations to theological principles. For example, in the case of this baptism, they might discuss how water represents death and new life in Christ. What metaphors of water could they relate to? Nature, vegetation, the park, hydration, whatever. How do these elements relate to the spiritual life? You see how you've started from the known and gradually you are going deeper and deeper without them knowing it because they are soaked in. Why does it matter? Why does it help? Designing for analysis helps students develop critical thinking skills, which are vital at the high school level. It also helps students understand the deeper meaning behind what they see or experience, connecting it to theological truths. Avoid the temptation to force them to think your way. We all have that temptation. Avoid it. Teach them how to think deeper by asking more open-ended questions. Because if they think our way, we've created a community of less thinkers. Let's return to how I will do this in this baptism. I will lead an open discussion, an open-ended question, such as, how does this baptism water speak to you about your journey? And so on and so forth. So let's look at the next step to evaluate. The evaluation step helps students relate what they have analyzed to their lives, making theology relevant and personal. Because if we leave them at wondering, they might wander to where we don't want to go. Find a way to draw them back again. Okay, now you are at Mount Tabor, the Transfiguration. Can we get down to the real world? Jesus did that to the apostles. Evaluation here also incorporates self-examination and reflection. So let's see how it works. Ask students how the theological concepts apply to their daily experiences. For example, after studying the concept of sin and redemption, have students reflect on how these ideas shape their understanding of forgiveness in relationships. You might also consider cultural relevance. Encourage students to examine how theological teachings interact with modern issues they care about, such as justice, relationships, compassion, empathy, or environmental stewardship. Why it helps? Evaluation, in the senses used here, makes theology relevant by connecting it to students' experiences and current societal issues. It encourages students to see theology not as an abstract knowledge, but as something that influences their decisions, values, and relationships. A deeper understanding of the faith leads to renewal and transformation, which is the goal of teaching them the faith. It isn't merely an academic exercise. So let's return to our baptism example. Ask students to reflect on their own baptism or those of their family members. For those who are not people of faith, ask those who are not of faith how they learn, what they learn from the baptism video or clips or imageries or arts or discussion they have been engaged. How does it resonate or not resonate with them? You are trying to give them agency. How does baptism mark the beginning of their spiritual journey? Ask them to provide concrete examples from their spiritual lives or those around them. Encourage them to think about how the symbolism of baptism, cleansing, renewal, initiation applies to their own lives. Production. Encourage creative expression. This stage allows students to take ownership of their learning by creating something that expresses their understanding of the theological concept. Production is loosely used here to mean creative expressions of their learning. Students might create art. That essay we give them, write a paper, poem, reflections, even produce a video with their phones, design a digital presentation or a poster. Let's see how it relates to baptism, for example. Have students create a digital poster, a video explaining the meaning of baptism, using symbols like water, oil, white cloth, and light. Encourage them to express what each element means and how it connects to their faith journey. For group work, they can collaborate, work together, show these illustrations. These might seem like irrelevant tasks, but actually what you are doing is allowing them to internalize by their creative self what they are learning, and it sticks. Finally, assessment. Assessment provides an opportunity for feedback and reflection, allowing students to evaluate both their learning and their peers' understanding. Teaching using assessment as a learning method, as you know in UBD, also provides feedback that deepens or reinforces understanding. Avoid evaluative assessment. Progress in the direction of assessment for learning, not assessment of learning. Assessment for learning. You can read the work about this by Dylan Williams. Assessment for learning is a continuous process of learning. Let's return to our baptism. Have students present their projects, offer constructive feedback to the class. Ask, how does this project explain baptism? What insight does it offer you? What unique aspects of the creative work provide fresh insight into the topic? What elements could be improved? And how might these change your life about baptism? How does it relate to the understanding provided in the resources, like the Bible and the catechism or the resources you gave to them, and so on and so forth? Encourage students to reflect on how their understanding of baptism has evolved throughout the lesson. They can write a short reflection on how they see the sacrament as relevant to their own lives. If we are using rubrics, be broad about it so that you can give room for that creative expression to internalize learning. Normally, when I do review of their papers, I give them chances for multiple reviews because it's consistent with iterative learning process. And there are tons of advantages in doing that. So to conclude, whether we use UBD, CODA, OEPA, or any other strategy, remember that the theology teacher creates a welcoming environment through which students encounter Christ. The church guides us to understand that the valid evidence of deeper understanding of catechesis is when the learner comes to know Christ and becomes the disciple. It means our students observe what we teach and who we are. We are their first visual representation of understanding God. being mindful of this reality and by grace shining so that they can see how we relate to what we teach is our most effective design for the path of learning. Such credibility has impacts far beyond any strategy, including this one I propose, we could ever propose or use. That's it. Thank you.